Everyone remembers their graduation as some neatly gift-wrapped memory, smiles beneath cardboard hats, adults humming proudly. But mine, if I close my eyes, I can taste chalk dust from the school gym, feel the rows of sweat on my brow, and still hear the laughter echoing off the rafters. They had handed me the microphone, calling my name out of alphabetical order for special recognition. I'd known it was coming, practiced my little speech the night before while my younger cousin, Jas, watched from the hallway, half amused, half bored. I was supposed to talk about my future plans. They let everyone else drone on, applauding with real warmth, so I sucked in my breath and started. I want to open a bakery, a real French patisserie. Here in Curitiba, my voice was thin, but for a second I saw my mother's lips part to smile, and then a cough. Hector, my uncle, not a cough really. It sounded almost like a snort. Someone laughed near the back, then another. The word confiteiro floated out, mocking, a bakery in Curitiba, as if I'd announced I planned to become a rock star astronaut. I barely had time to finish a line about baking bringing people together before the principal clapped politely and took the microphone away. The memory blurred after that, but I remember the look on my grandmother's face, not ashamed, not angry, just sad, as though she'd seen the ending already. Later, at the reception, relatives approached with sideways jabs. "You'll eat your own profits," Uncle Hector teased, grabbing a sweet from the communal table. Others just shook their heads or patted me on the shoulder with empty congratulations. Even my mother, hours later as we rode the bus home, glanced at me and said, "Son, love and bread do not feed a house. Maybe you'll change your mind at university." I saw the hope there, brittle as the crust on Pau Frankias. I never hated them, that's the strangest part. I just wanted them to understand. When my university acceptance arrived, I told her I'd not be going. The sense of humiliation twisted deeper, more private. My father didn't say a word that night at dinner. I could hear the cars on Avenida Silva Jardim, the entire city moving on as if nothing in my world had broken. After that, I started work at Padaria Bom Gosto, a greasy-smelling, neon-lit bakery, as their lowest apprentice. It wasn't glamorous. I woke at 4 most mornings, hands sticky with dough, learning by repetition and error. Antonio, my boss, showed little patience, cursing when I got the measurements wrong, tossing my first batch of croissants in the trash. "Brazilian flours, not French flour, boy, stop playing make-believe." He meant it as a warning, not advice. The locals wanted pão de queijo coxinhas brigadeiros. They sneered at my experiments. Even Jasai, visiting me in the kitchen, wrinkled her nose. "Why bother with this, Davy?" I didn't have a good answer. All I knew was that when everything else felt rigid in my life, when the city, family, and even my body seemed to ask for conformity, kneading butter into flour gave me peace. It was tactile, real. When I was lucky, a batch rose perfectly golden, little clouds of pastry giving off a scent that could make the world tilt, if only for a moment. Patience. I learned early that it isn't weakness. It's a slow burn, a daily truce with yourself that things aren't good yet but could be if you keep moving. Some nights, exhausted, I'd stare at the city from the rooftop of our apartment, hands still raw, and imagine the sign of my own place illuminating the street below. But there was no money, no encouragement. Whenever I saved enough from my meager wages, something always interfered: bills, medicine, new shoes for Jasai. Years passed as a background hum of disappointment. What most people don't tell you about humiliation is that it seeps in. Every time I walked into a family gathering, even when nobody said anything, I could feel their disappointment, the way they'd scan past me like I was some absence in the room. But I stuck at it. It was the only way I knew how to be. Antonio finally let me make one thing for the front window, a raspberry tart, pale and perfect beneath a glisten of sugar. It sold slowly, curious people poking it, unsure. "Imported nonsense," an old woman said, buying one out of pity. Not for the last time, I cleaned the display case, hiding my disappointment, but disappointment is a teacher. Rejection made me meticulous, not just about food, but about every detail. I kept a ledger, recorded failures, tried again. I watched YouTube videos at night, devoured old French cookbooks Antonio let me borrow, marked up every recipe. When the time came, years later, after Antonio retired and left the place to his uninterested son, I'd found someone who believed a little. Sarah, a regular who bought my failed eclairs no matter how misshapen. She was starting an artisanal food market and she wanted novelty. "Make something no one else can, Davy," she'd urged. "Curitibanos like to be surprised, trust me." So I had 1 week. In that cramped kitchen, I made citrus tarts with a crust so flaky it sang to the touch. I dusted passion fruit creams with burnt sugar, piped guava mousse into almond shells. I invested everything I'd squirreled away, even dipped into the rent money. The morning of the market, I was nearly sick with nerves. My hands trembled as I arranged the display tray. For 2 hours, no one stopped. Then an architect with glossy shoes paused, tasted, and smiled. By noon, a crowd gathered. By dusk, I had nothing left but crumbs. Sarah pressed cash into my hand, far more than I'd earned in a month at Bom Gosto. "You have something, Davy," she whispered, squeezing my shoulder. What followed wasn't easy. If I thought rejection hurt, success was something else entirely, knife-edged and sharp, dangerous if you lunged too blindly at it. When people started coming back to the market for my pastries, whispers grew about the French boy, about my hands, about the little shop coming soon. Except I had no shop, just more orders, more cash, and a steadily building certainty. My family called it luck, a fad, sure I'd be out of business before winter. Still, every week more customers came, young mothers, university students, businessmen with tired faces and hungry bellies. When I finally found a tiny storefront off Rua Vicente Machado, it took everything I had left. There was mold in one corner, peeling linoleum, a leaky sink, but I could see it. White tile, marble counter, glass case full of gold and pastel, my own little promise in concrete. Renovating the place was half battle, half ballet. I slept on flour sacks, ate leftovers, painted until my fingers split. Some days I wanted to give up, but the smell of yeast and burnt sugar in the morning kept me going. My mother didn't come to the opening. Jasai did, hair tied up, grinning awkwardly. She brought 3 friends who filmed everything on their phones. For a few weeks, customers trickled in. The cafe was always half empty. Some days I sat alone with stacks of tarts cooling uneaten, but word spreads. Someone posted about me on Instagram, my hand-drawn logo, my battered cappuccino machine, the raspberry tart glittering beneath the cold light. I started to sell out most days, then every day. The French consul came. A photographer from Sao Paulo. Magazines wrote little profiles, nothing too dramatic, just enough to draw in people. Each success felt like a borrowed coat, warm but not quite mine. I'd sweep the floor at night and think about all those nights on the roof, city humming far below. It never felt complete. 3 years after that graduate speech, Antonio himself came to visit. He bought a pain au chocolat, ate in silence, and then patted my cheek. "I was wrong, Davy, you made it real." I kept my first review carefully cut from the newspaper, taped above the oven for courage. Fame, such as it was, followed like a stray dog. I'd see people mimicking my recipes at home, followings sprout on social media. Invitations came from Sao Paulo, Rio, even Paris itself, but my heart was here, in the low, grey mornings of Curitiba, where hope felt like the strongest ingredient I'd ever held. Years passed that way. I lost track of some relatives, grew apart from a few old friends, but the city changed around me. There were 5 patisseries now, each advertising their French-style delicacies, but people kept coming for mine. Sometimes, after closing, I'd look out at the empty cafe and still hear the laughter from that school gym in my memory, softened now, nearly gone. Word spread about an anniversary celebration, 5 years since the day I'd opened. Sarah, now a partner and dear friend, wanted to make a show of it, send out invitations, really mark the moment. I told her, invite my family, all of them. It felt like a dare. Some didn't answer. My mother wrote that she'd come if only to see Jasai. That morning the air was chilly, mist pouring down from the surrounding hills. Banners fluttered in the grey light. I'd made everything myself, arriving at the shop by 2, exhausted but wired. Crowds gathered, customers queued up at the door. We handed out little sample trays, lemon curd in tiny shortbread shells, soft miniature eclairs with caramel ribbons, and slices of chocolate coconut gâteau. Papers sent journalists. Television crews appeared, lights chasing the grey shadows from the corners. Just after noon, my mother walked in. Her hair was neat, her face composed, lips pressed tight. Beside her, Uncle Hector, older now, the lines in his face harsher. The rest followed, the old laughter dulled but curiosity burning. They stood clustered near the door, uncertain. For a moment, everyone seemed to fade out like someone had hit pause. I wiped my hands, stepped out from behind the counter, heart stumbling. "Welcome," I said, voice soft. Some customers stared, eyes darting between us. I caught Uncle Hector glancing at the sign, La Vicecre, then at the rows of pastries behind the glass. My mother's throat worked, her gaze wandered, refusing to settle. Jasai, older now, gave me a tight hug, whispering, "It's so beautiful, Davy." Then she guided the others to a table. Sarah appeared with a platter. She pressed it into my mother's hands. "Millefeuille, feathery thin. Please try." I waited, the noise of the crowd filling my ears. My mother lifted the fork, took one tiny mouthful, and for a second I saw a memory cross her face, her own childhood perhaps, or a distant sweetness remembered. She swallowed, eyes shining just a little. Uncle Hector bit into a tartelette. I watched his chin pause, brow furrow. He chewed slowly, then took another without speaking. My grandmother, frail but radiant, smiled. Voca fes mesmo Davi, she murmured. You did it. For the first time the skepticism melted. Someone called for more espresso, complimented the croissants. My mother looked around, nodding at the crowded tables, the display case emptying by the minute. This is yours, Uncle Hector asked quietly. All of it, I replied, unable to stop the shake in my hands. He leaned back, surveying the cafe, the customers lined up, the staff bustling behind the counter. It wasn't a palace. It wasn't Paris, but it was full alive. Instead of a joke, he just said, "You've done well, Davy." There was a weight there, an admission heavier than any cake. The afternoon passed in a blur. Journalists circled, snapping photos. Customers kept coming, and word must have run ahead down Rua Vicente Machado, because each time the door opened, new faces entered. My pastries sold out quickly. When someone asked for more, I laughed, really laughed, for the first time that day. As dusk fell over the city, lights blinking on, the streetcar bells in the distance, my family gathered near the counter. They'd waited, uncertain at first but now proud. My mother pressed her hand to my cheek. "I'm sorry, son, I never thought," she shook her head, eyes bright. "We were afraid, that's all. We didn't want you to starve chasing nonsense." "It wasn't nonsense," I whispered. "No," she agreed, "you made it true." Jasse reached for a macaroon, popping it into her mouth. The speech was right, you know. Baking did bring people together, in the end. We laughed, a low, easy sound, not mocking, simply real. The crowd thinned. My mother lingered, gazing at the wall where the old newspaper review hung, yellowed but proud. Later, as I closed up in the familiar dusk, I stood beneath the glowing sign, cold air wrapping around me. I thought about all those mornings long ago, kneading dough, counting coins, listening to sidewalks hum with possibility. About the faces that doubted, the voices that strung, and the patient days spent gambling on hope and flour. Now the city felt different, less an adversary, more an embrace. As my family walked home, together this time, I locked the door, breathing in the last traces of sugar and yeast, exhaustion and victory knitting quietly together in my chest. I turned off the lights, but the warmth lingered. That old, bruising laughter had become a seam in the fabric, nothing more. The place was mine, sweet and real, humming with possibility. Curitiba's early night fell. Tomorrow would come and I would begin again, dough, patience, dreams. And if people remembered my speech at graduation, I hoped they remembered it for what came after when I returned, not to prove them wrong, but to show what hope and hands could do if left in peace to rise.